Hi everyone, welcome to this video by Aekam Academy. In this video, we'll be discussing the memory-based questions, the questions that have been asked in GATE Architecture and Planning 2026. So this video particularly will cover three sections. That is your section 1, Architecture, Planning and Design, Construction Management, section 2, and section 3, which is Environmental Planning and Design. Couple of quick thoughts on how the exam was actually this year based on our students from our Udan 1.0 batch as well as many students that we've been talking to is the difficulty level was moderate. Some questions were easy, some questions were a bit tricky. One very standout feature or fact of the exam was that there were a lot of MSQ based questions as well as ample of NAT based questions this year. So if you compare it to the previous year there were NAT questions, but MSQ questions were very less previous year in 2025. In 2026, it has been observed that a lot of questions were MSQ questions. Again, the purpose of this video is for you guys to watch and see what can be the silly mistakes that could be made, could be rectified, and what else can you learn from all the questions. I don't want any one of you to again repent on what all options you must have selected or overthink on what all options you must have selected, or you must be thinking कि ये मेरा wrong हो गया, ये मेरा right हो गया. So all those things you should not be worrying about a lot right now. I'm sure all of you will do good. So let's start with the first section. Okay, starting with the first question. This is from the universal design that is a part of architectural planning and design. And it states, as per Rights to Disability Act 2016, which of the following tactile tile or tiles is or are used to assist mobility? So the keywords here are tactile tiles and mobility. Okay. Now, if you closely see or observe or remember, this a very similar question like this was asked in GATE 2020 as a match the following, right? So even as a trend that what we've been noticing in the entire paper, a lot of questions were actually the trick or the options of the previous year questions. And previous year questions, I don't mean like very long ago, but recent previous year questions. Okay, so that is one very ongoing trend across the question paper. Coming back to this question, you can see which of the following tactile tiles are used to assist mobility. Now, there are six major types of tactile tiles that you need to know or you need to study. It is your blister paving, that is your, it is just these off, your smaller bumps that are there, right? And offset blisters. So if you see all these blisters are right now in a straight line, in offset, they are staggered. Okay. So what blister paving, the purpose of blister paving is that whenever a person is walking across, say, these guidelines, I'm sure you must have seen all these guidelines that are present, right? So once the person is walking through it and there is a turn or there's a signal, intersection, whatever it is, so it gives the idea that there is a turn happening. It gives an idea that there has to be, it gives ample time for the person to make a decision that a left, right, or he or she has to move forward, right? So that is blister paving. So this actually helps or assists in mobility. So this can be one of the options that was correct. Again, we don't have the exact options that were present, but as per the question, this could be one such thing. Second is definitely guidance paving. If you see from the image itself, right, this you must have observed in a lot of institutional spaces, assembly spaces, railway stations, right? Guidance paving is generally given. So again, this is something that assists your mobility. Okay, these two, there were two more options as per feedback of the students, but they were not within the recommended tactile tiles that were there. So there were some tiles which were square in nature. So this is again something that is not there. So this is a misleading option. And similarly, the fourth option also was something like that. Again, there are what you have to learn is through analysis of previous year questions. If this particular question has come in a gate paper, say gate 2020, you need to analyze all the six options. You need to see all the six types of tiles. You need to understand what is the purpose, what is the geometry like. So if that particular question is twisted and asked again in any other next paper, you will be having an idea, right? So this is how analysis of previous year questions work, and this is a very important thing. So this is it for this first question. This was a 2 mark MSQ question. The next question is, this is from computer aided designing or softwares, again part of section 1. Which of the following command or commands of AutoCAD is or are correctly matched or correct? Okay, so there were 4 commands that were given briefly. It was AR, and the description was to create multiple copies in a rectangular or a polar format. So that is array. So you all must be knowing this, where you have say one line and you have to maybe create a grid. So you have an array function. So this can be again linear array as in this just extends in a one direction. It can be polar array. Array, even in AutoCAD, Rhino, Vectorworks, a lot of these CAD softwares, you must have seen that it repeats across in a radial fashion, right? So this option is correct. So A option is correct. Then it was SXL is used to explode single objects into separate components. Now again, this command and description don't match. Whenever single object into separate components, so there is no such command called as SXL for in AutoCAD. So again, this is a wrong option. CHA is used to create a beveled edge between two lines. So yes, that is true. Chamfer, we have studied this in building construction also, right? A lot of time where you see chamfered edges like this. So this is correct. And DRK was given. It is used to break multiple objects into a single object. Again, this is not. This would be incorrect. The description is matching with respect to the command explode, right? So again, it is not correct. So the correct answers would tentatively be A and C, which is AR and CHA. Okay, going ahead, there was a match the following question, 2 mark MCQ question. It was based on some visual elements. Okay, so the 4 elements were interlacing, progression, alternation, and spatial tension. So you had to match the following. So let's go one by one. Interlacing is when two forms overlapping and penetrating each other, sharing a common intersecting area. This again was a previous year question, PYQ, in GATE 2018, where for example you have this one grid like this, then second grid is going like this, right? Third grid is going something like this. So something like this, and there would be a fourth grid also. Obviously, it will be interlaced like this, so this won't come. So this is an interlacing pattern. Where is this being seen? So if you carefully observe in Mughal architecture or in any Islamic architecture, the geometric patterns, they follow this particular interlacing principle, right? So there you could see, even if you see these cane weavers houses and all, you must be very much familiar with interlacing term, right? So any visual that was something like this, or in a say hexagonal form or a triangular form like this, would be A. Okay. Progression, a sequence of elements gradually changing in size, spacing, or dimension. Progression is more like, for example, if I have to draw, it can be a square that is maybe reducing in size, or it can be, say, a triangle that is increasing in size. So all these are examples of progression. Alternation, on the other hand, would be uh, there might not be a reduction in size as such, but there is a change in the geometry. So for example, alternating things, A, B. So it can be, say, a circle and a square, a circle and a square, or it can be a triangle and a triangle, a triangle and a triangle. This is alternation. Okay, so this something like this would pertain to option C, alternation. And spatial tension. Spatial tension happens when two separate forms, or two in 2D it can be shapes also, they are placed close together but without touching each other. So for example, something like this. You have this particular say for example a square, and you have say this particular small square like this, and you have this particular small square like this is creating spatial tension between them. Again, what can be further done is to have a positive negative space around it. So again, this spatial tension can be in circles also, can be like this and like this is all, these are examples of spatial tension. So relatively very easy. If you are just able to identify 2 3 options also, you'll be able to able to eliminate options, right? That is a very important strategy when it comes to MCQ, match the following based MCQ questions. You should, even if you know two questions, you can easily 95% of the times eliminate options, right? The next question was a very interesting question based on golden ratio and golden mean. So questions on golden ratio and golden mean have been asked in previous year questions as latest as say GATE 2022, but it has just been a theory question where they have maybe asked what is the value, what are the proportions and all. In this particular exam they had asked a NAT question based on this particular golden rectangle. So all these are following golden mean and there was a golden spiral. The easiest way to solve these questions is, for example, if this particular side is asked and you have this particular dimension, you start applying golden rule in all the rectangles. That's it. Because if you see, all the rectangle, the sides of the rectangle are overlapping. So if I have one dimension, say if I have this dimension, I automatically have this dimension x through the golden ratio, which is your A is nothing but your longer side, right? B is nothing but your shorter side. Okay, so A by B, that is how we do. So that is A plus B by A is 1.618. Okay, so through this, it is simple ratio, simple proportion. You can find maybe Y. Okay, and then you have to just apply basic geometry rules. So as per whatever the size was given in the question in the GATE exam, you could have computed this. The next question is a 2-mark MSQ question. This is based on space planning, space standards. A new type of question, not very new, I would say. This was being asked in, say, GATE 2008, 2007. Those kind of papers had these kind of questions. But relatively in last 5 years, this is a new type of question. There were spaces given in an operation theater, and you had to again match the correct labels. Okay, that was there. Basically, in an operation theater or a scenario, you have a corridor. Okay, there are two different zones that you generally have. You have a semi-sterile zone, and then you have a completely sterile zone. Okay, so semi-sterile zone would be a zone where there are a lot of equipment rooms, where there are some nurses rooms, there are changing rooms. All this will happen in your semi-sterile zone. Okay, so there's a lot of to and fro. It is like a buffer space. This is like a buffer space between your main operation theater where operation will occur, so this direction, as well as your outside. Okay, so this is your buffer space. Now what was asked was, I think it was dress change, right? So dress change area would lie somewhere here in the semi-sterile zone. Now once we come to say any operation theater or any of the operation theaters, there will always be a pre-operation era and there would be a post-operation area, right? So there will be a pre-op and post-op, whatever the markings were given, that would be the two options. And if you see, the disposal room is always located at the end, or it is always a one way flow. Okay, so this is a very important principle. So all your waste, your utilities that have been contaminated will be going across outside your system boundary. Okay, so this is how generally planning works. Based on that, there might be multiple options. Okay, so it could be PQRS. So in that, one set is correct, then it can be just PQR, one set is correct, then two are incorrect, three can be correct, one can be incorrect. Okay, but basic trick in solving such MSQ questions is to first start eliminating the options that you know. So for example, there are four options: A, B, C, D. Okay, and then you have say P Q R in one, you have Q S P in one, S R Q in one, and P Q S in one. Say this, this is very indicative. For example, out of the four terminologies, you are familiar with one terminology. You are 100% sure that this is the correct space. Now you have to just check. For example, in option B and C, that particular thing is wrongly matched. So automatically these two options get cancelled. Then you just have to cross check and verify. You have to use a bit of logic also while working on such questions. Okay, relatively again a easy question from section 1. Okay, there was one more question on section 1. So we couldn't get the entire details of it. It was based on, I think, axonometric projection or an oblique projection. There was a plan and it was projected to form elevation or something like that. So we couldn't get the details of it. But if you guys are aware of the question, please feel free to post it in the comment section. We'll be getting back to you on that. Yeah. So section one, as you saw, was relatively easier. It was not that difficult. It demanded a lot of logical thinking and good understanding of previous year questions and concepts that were there. On an average, the weightage for that particular section was approximately 10 marks again. So you can see section one is one of the highest weightage topics that is there in common part. Okay. Coming to section two, that is your construction management. In section 2, we have a very much set footprint. Usually you have one numerical from CPM or PERT. So you have one numerical from your quantity estimation, and there can be some smaller MCQs here and there regarding, say, professional practice, disaster management. There can be questions based on long span structures, right? So overall, you can always expect like 7 to 8 marks of theory from your construction management that is there. The first question obviously was from project management, but this time it was based on PERT, not CPM. PERT was not being asked in, say, last 5 years. So this was again, PERT has been repeated here. Now, just to give you a brief description, what is CPM, what is PERT? CPM, PERT are two techniques in which you estimate your project completion times. You have certain probabilities in PERT. CPM is more deterministic. So let's see what it is extremely briefly. CPM is nothing but critical path method. And PERT is project evaluation and review technique. Okay, so project evaluation and review technique. Now what happens is CPM is extremely deterministic. That means CPM will have your active. So for example, these are the events 1, 2, and these are activities. CPM method will have the activities that are going to happen. PERT has certain distribution, that is a beta distribution that happens. So it is probabilistic model. I'm not going into too much details of CPM and PERT, but in the question what was asked was there was an entire event network that was given, like for example 1 to say 3, then 2 to 4, 3 to 5, 3 to 6, like this. So an entire distribution was given of events. So you have to understand how to draw this particular network diagram, right? Then they had given three major times, that was your TO, most likely, and what your pessimistic time. So you had optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic time that was given. We know the estimated duration is generally TO plus 4TM plus TP by 6. So you have to find the individual duration. So this, for example, these durations were not given directly. They were given TO, TM, TP, and you have to apply this formula and you have to individually get all the durations. So that can be a bit time consuming, more than time consuming. High chances of you doing silly mistakes. Even if it is simple multiplication, there are high chances. For example, 4 into 6, 2 into 3, 3 into 2. So 2 into 3, sometimes you might write it as 5 instead of 6. These are very small silly mistakes. So always while you prepare or while you give mock tests, give exams, make sure you don't make these kind of mistakes. That is there. Okay. Now once you have all the durations, you have to draw this diagram and you have to start finding what is something known as your critical path. Critical path is a set of activities or a set of events which will be the longest. Okay, so for example, just imagine you are doing a project in a firm and your project manager is working, or you are the project manager. You will always promise a date or a deadline to your client. That is the longest time your employees are going to take, right? So for example, there are 3 4 activities. One is working on 3D rendering, one is doing plans, one is doing sections, one is doing modeling, right? So for example, modeling is going to take the longest time. So obviously you will take that particular time as your deadline or as your evaluation time, right? You won't say that, for example, 3D rendering ko 4 din lag raha hai and modeling is taking 10 days, so let's have a deadline on of 4 days. So that would mean that as a manager, you have not delegated delegated the time effectively. That means the modeling guy will have to work overtime in order to meet that deadline of 4 days, right? So that is a very logical concept of critical path. So once you draw the network, you have to just start finding which of the path is the longest path. So it can be 1 2 3 8, 1 2 6 7 8, 1 4 5 7 8, so whatever it is. Okay, again, there are methods that we do, forward pass, backward pass methods. Again, not discussing a lot in detail, but these are the methods you should be aware of. Once you get the critical path, say critical path is 15 days. Okay, the question asked, this was very similar to what was asked in gate 23. A project start date was given, which was, I think, 27 July. Okay, and it was given that there are no holidays except for 15th August, that is Independence Day. So when will the project end? First things, always include the start date. Okay, whenever these questions are asked. So that is first thing. Secondly, if you are very confident in doing mental maths and then deriving the answer, that's very good thing, but don't risk it. If you still feel you need to write everything down, I would suggest write it down. So you can just write 27, 28, 29, 30. July has 31st, 31st, then 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. So you can just write it down. Make sure this, in gate 23 it was assumed to have no holidays, so it was a direct counting. In gate 2026 there was one holiday. Okay, so you have to skip this date and move forward. So you can't count this date in your project completion dates. Okay, so that was just one trick. So again, it would give you some answer. So if your concepts are clear, this is a very easy question, provided you don't make silly mistakes, and it is quite time consuming. It is a elaborated kind of numerical. The next question was based on finding steel reinforcement in staircase base slab. Okay, so that was again a bit time consuming, but your concept should be clear. So the question was, a staircase base slab was given like this. There were this, and then okay, this is 90-degree and it is broken like this. In totality, there were 10 such steps in one flight. So this is 10. Okay, and certain data were given. For example, your tread was 300 mm, riser was 150 mm, the thickness of your base slab, so this part 75 mm. Okay, the width of the staircase. So if this is the cross sectional area, we can just maybe visualize something like this. The width of your staircase, right? So this entire thing was 1.5 meters or 1500 mm. Okay, and then they had given that your proportion of your volume of reinforcement is 0.75% of your total volume, and density of reinforcement is 7,800 kgs per meter cube. So what is the mass of the reinforcement? This was the question. What is the mass of the reinforcement? Quickly, how to approach such questions: start breaking down geometries. Always remember volume. What are the units of volume? Meter cube. It can always be written as cross section area, meter square, into another dimension. It can be width, depth, height, anything. Okay, meter. That's it. So whenever you have, say, an extruded surface, whatever the cross section area is, okay, you have to compute the cross section area. If you know it is simply being extruded, you have to multiply it by the uniform extrusion height, width, depth. Okay, this principle can be used to solve the question that came last year also, last year also. So in 2025, there was a question based on semicircular arch, if you remember. Same, you just have to find this profile area of semicircular arch and then you can multiply. Similarly, you had center line questions also. Again, the entire idea is same, where you find your cross section surface and you multiply it by the center line. Okay, so this is your basic fundamental. Now you have to understand what are the geometries involved. If you see closely, it was given that this is a 90 degree. So if I start drawing a line like this, I'll get a rectangle here, right? Rectangle, and I'm getting these 90-degree right angle triangles. Now there are 10 such right angle triangles that are there. So what I would suggest is when you write it in the exam or any mock test, you just start identifying shapes. So you have, for example, one rectangle, then you have 10 into right angle triangles. This would be my cross sectional area or shapes that are there. Okay, what is the dimension of rectangle? It can be the width, that is 75 mm. The point of mistake that you are going to make here, or probability of making mistake, is writing it as 0.75. This is incorrect, right? 0.75 meters, it would be 750 mm. So this would be 0.075. Okay, this into the entire length, that is the now length we have not gotten yet, but if you see clearly, this is the right angle triangle, this forms the hypotenuse. So through Pythagoras theorem, you have 300, 150. If you just find the hypotenuse, that is your hypotenuse square is side 1 square plus side 2 square. I think it comes around 3.35, around this particular value. So if one step is 3.35, the hypotenuse, 10 steps would be 3.35 into 10, this would be 33.5. Correct? Easy to understand. That means I got my rectangle's cross section area. This is 33.5. Okay, so I got one particular value here that is already there. Now the second part is finding the area of right angle triangle. Now what is the area of a triangle? It is nothing but half into base into height, right? Base into height is an area of a parallelogram. So if you just draw a diagonal, you get a triangle. So triangle is half into base into height. So this would be 10 into half into base is what it is. Your If we consider it this way, it would be 150 mm into 0.3. Again, you will get some value in meter square, right? So these values are in meter square. These values are in meters square. Okay, I'm not spending time in calculating the values. I'm sure you would have done it correctly. What I'm spending time is to actually understand what the concept is. Secondly, what can be the possible silly mistakes. Okay, this is very important thing. You have to be critical about what are the silly mistakes that you are making. So when you do your first mock test, okay, you understand कि चलो मैंने estimation में ये silly mistake बनाया कि मैंने cross section area तो ढूंढ लिया, but I have not multiplied it by the depth. Or I have made one silly mistake where I am unable to understand what I've written in such a long question, even though I know this is a very easy question. Okay, so the moment you have your area, so you get your area in meter square, you just multiply it by 1.5. So you'll get your volume in meter cube. Now very easy, total volume का reinforcement क्या है? 0.75%. Okay, so it will be 0.75 upon 100. Again, don't do a silly mistake of writing it as 75%. So V reinforcement you'll get. Now what is the relationship between density and mass? Your density is mass by volume. Very easy to understand. So your mass is nothing but density into volume. So you must be getting your mass in kg. Always check what the units are. Always check what the units are. They can ask you in tons, they can ask you in pounds. This year itself, you must be aware, in housing there was question on acres, right? So a lot of times the questions are only in meter square and hectares, but this year they had asked a question on acres. So you must be knowing what is the conversion between meter square and acres, right? So it is 1 acre is 4046.86 meter square. So such unit conversions are very important. Second thing they had asked this year, Clarence Perry's neighborhood unit, right? The distances were in miles. So it was again a, US based system. It was not a metric system. So the moment you do all these things, you need to have a basic idea. Again, I would strongly suggest understand what is the conversion factor between kg and pound. You never know, they might ask such an elaborate question. You are able to solve the entire thing, but the final answer is required in pounds, LB. Okay, so this is a task that you all can do. Units, very important. Chalo, so iska concept clear hai. So let's move on to the next question. The next question was from professional practice. It was a 2 mark MSQ question. It was, which of the following is or are the duties of Council of Architecture? Now you need to understand Council of Architecture is a regulatory authority that is there, and it was formed based on your Architects Act, that was 1972 Act. So I'm sure like you are aware of the activities that COA does, right? Even if you have not read it. For example, your standards of education. For example, NATA is taken by COA. That gives you entry to B architecture program, right? So even the B architecture education, whatever subjects you study in school, are based on what are the minimum standards of education as per COA. So that is one thing. Second is your code of conduct, architects ethics and all, that is covered. A lot of things you will see, the competitions are arranged by COA. Registration, right? Who can practice as an architect, who can be called as an architect, all these things are governed by COA, right? So as per what we have understood, regulation of education and your professional conduct is somewhere the two options were given, so those would be the correct option. There were two incorrect options also. For example, there was an option on COA regulates the urban planning, which would be false. COA doesn't have uh, uh, the scope of work is not with respect to urban planning. So maybe ITPI or some planning based institution has that particular scope. So that was incorrect. Secondly, COA regulates what all building materials can be used in buildings. Again, this would not be in the purview of COA because we know, right? Your buildings or whatever it is, material specifications are given by CPW. Okay, so that is generally, or NBC also has some specifications, so we generally follow those manuals that are there. Okay, so this was again a relatively easy MSQ question. The only thing of making mistakes here is when there are a lot of MSQ questions, you have to go through every question, so your time management becomes critical. What I suggest to all my students is, if you see a question that is taking a lot of time, it is okay to skip it. Okay, you don't have to attempt 65 to 65 questions in GATE. That is not the thing. It is okay if you skip 10 questions. It is okay if you skip 7 questions. You are saving that much of time and investing it in concepts that you know, right? So for example, there is one question that is very difficult, and say let's go back to the previous question only, the quantity estimation. It was a long lengthy question. You know the concept, but you made silly mistakes because of lack of time. So that should not happen. Okay, that is one point always. And this is a good time, you must be preparing for next year's GATE or any other say competitive exam. So all these silly mistakes you need to write it down कि कहाँ mistakes हो रहा है. Okay. The next question was a very interesting question according to me. It was not being asked in a previous equation. So again, a new concept was introduced. The terms were given: risk, hazard, exposure, vulnerability, capacity, and the relationships were given. So you had to match it. We don't have the exact relationships, but basically your risk is what is the what is the uh, your damage factor, what is the risk that is there in a particular situation. You can also, if you have done any elective course on risk assessment, this would be something you must be familiar with. It is what is your potential hazard, and so hazard that is there into how vulnerable is your building, how vulnerable is your population. Okay, so that is one thing. Now this also depends on something known as exposure. For how long in duration, or for how much in area. For example, radiation, nuclear radiation. So in that case, it would be length of your time cycle, so your duration, as well as the surface area, on how much area concentration. So that, right? So that is a multiplicative thing. So if you see, there are various mathematical models, there are various agencies who have given this as hazard into vulnerability into exposure. So if any one of the options was this, it would have been correct. Risk can also, so this risk is an absolute risk. Okay, कि ये total risk है. But if I have to evaluate कि मेरा risk, so for example, I got the absolute risk with respect to say hazard into vulnerability into exposure. But now I want to evaluate every body or every living being will have something known as your resilience, right? We in climate change adaptation mitigation, you always come across this term resilience, right? What is resilience? It is ability to how quickly are you recovering when you are distressed. So that comes from your capacity, whatever it is there. So in URDPFI, if you have gone through URDPFI and my videos on that, you must have come across carrying capacity, infrastructure capacity. What is that capacity? Capacity is how much can it sustain. So when I, for example, this is the total damage or exposure that has happened upon my capacity will give you your risk with respect to your coping capacity. So even this option, if it was given, was correct. Okay. So again, we don't have the options exactly, but these are the tentative ideas or tentative options that could have been correct. Again, again, one more MSQ based question, but this is again based on image labeling. So we have come across multiple MSQ questions where it was image labeling. A suspension bridge or a cable stayed bridge was given and elements were to be named, right? So I think, I suppose the questions were based on this particular thing, that is your tower or something known as pylon. It is a vertical mast that is there, right? That supports your, that is the main cable that is anchored to your anchorage. So your anchorage is holding your cables, right? It is providing that particular thrust. Through this, your suspender cables are supporting something known as your stiffening deck. And obviously you have the main cable as well. So there were certain terms with respect to this. So again, this is an MSQ based question. That means some options would have the correctly matched things and some options would have been the incorrect thing. Again, the strategy has to be identify which all options are incorrect, eliminate it, and then check the two options or three options that are correct. Okay, so such questions are again easy to score, but they will consume time. So time management becomes very important. What I was suggesting is, for example, in the last question, that was the risk capacity, if you're completely unaware of the subject, it was okay to skip that MSQ, right? So you could have given more time on other questions. A very easy question based on earthquake. Earthquake has been in a lot of demand recently. So last year also there was a MSQ question based on earthquake, right? Which of the following is or are after effects of an earthquake? So it was your tsunami, then liquefaction. These two are correct options. Then it was, I think, tornado and heat waves. Those two are incorrect, obviously. So again, the concept of earthquake was put into it. So you see a lot of concepts have already been discussed in previous year questions. So the moment last year, if you would have seen earthquake, you should have in your notes written down, if I've seen earthquake, how do earthquakes occur? How do they occur? And where do they occur? What are the effects? How do you measure earthquake? What are the some famous earthquakes that have happened, especially in India? We know Bhuj earthquake in Latur, that is in Maharashtra. Also, there have been multiple earthquakes in your Himalaya regions, right? You always see that Delhi has faced some tremors, so that is one very important thing, right? And then you also have, with respect to your earthquakes, you can also have your earthquake seismic design that is there. So that is obviously there. But all these things you have to analyze from just one concept or one topic, that is your earthquake. So the origin point of an earthquake, that is in your interior of the earth, is known as a focus or a hypocenter. Okay. The moment if you draw a vertical line to your crust, that is known as epicenter. Okay. So don't get confused between hypo, okay, and epi surface. Okay. The line across which this fault is known as the fault line. There was a previous year question, I think 20 years ago or 15 years ago, based on this also. So what is this particular line called? That is a fault line. Okay, so these diagrams become very important. So the correct answer would be hypocenter. So this was with respect to construction management. As you could see, the tentative weightage was around say 6 to 7 or 6 to 8 marks. Again, a very important section. The next section is your environmental planning and design. It is relatively a theoretical subject, very easy, very scoring. The first question, which everybody could have predicted, was from SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. You need to remember the 17 SDGs. What are these SDGs? There are various mnemonics. You can make your mnemonics, or you can just understand through correlation. And how many targets? There are 169 targets, right? This can also be a question. So again, once you see SDG, I want you to research regarding when were SDGs formed. Okay, how many? What are the number of targets? What is the goal deadline? All these questions should be popping in your mind when you see a new concept. The question was dash states that which of the following SDG states that end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, promote sustainable agriculture by 2030. The question, the answer is this SDG 2, which is zero hunger. Okay, so because hunger hai, food security hai, right, nutrition hai, so it is SDG 2. The option I think included SDG 11 and SDG 6 also. Last year only there was question on SDG 3 and 6. Then there was a MSQ question, which of the following SDG is or are related directly or indirectly to water. So in that you have clean water, sanitation, then you have your life below water, that is there. Very important. SDGs you have to practice. Right. The next question was a new concept. It is based on ecosystem services. Generally, we do this in ecology. Basically, ecosystem services is all your living beings that are there in ecosystem, right? They will give you some benefits. These are known as ecosystem services. Now, they are majorly four types of ecosystem services. Okay, there is provisioning, providing, okay, regulatory, regulating, supporting, and culture. So provisioning is something that you get, a resource you get. So for example, food, then your raw materials, your medicinal resources, your water. So oceans provide, right? Your forest or plants, they give you food, so they are providing. Every living thing can always have one or more ecosystem services that they are giving. For example, ocean will also regulate, right? You have your ocean currents, your temperature. A forest will also regulate. What will they regulate? Forests are very much responsible as carbon sinks, right, or carbon sequestration, photosynthesis. So again, they will regulate. If you see air quality regulation, trees, climate regulation, your water cycle, then you have your various wastewater, waste regulation, pollination, very important. All 70% of your agriculture produce depends on your bee pollination, right? So pollination, all these are regulating. Cultural is your not material based, but there is some faith belief associated with it. For example, even in forest, that was asked in the question, you must have heard of sacred groves that are there, right? Sacred groves. So that is your cultural thing. A lot of communities, tribal communities, worship forests, right? Bishnoi community also. So a lot of communities worship forests. And at the apex of all these things, supporting is you are provisioning as well as supporting. The you're provisioning, regulating, cultural hai, and as well as you are supporting your ecosystem. So the correct options would have been your for trees would be provisioning, regulatory, and cultural. I think the fourth was geopolitical or geophysical, something like that. So that would be incorrect. These three would be the correct options. Again, you have seen the new concept of ecosystem services. List down some एलिमेंट्स. फॉर एग्जांपल ओशन, वो क्या इकोसिस्टम सर्विसेज दे सकते हैं? बीज, ये क्या इकोसिस्टम सर्विसेज दे सकते हैं? देन मे बी यू कैन ऑल्सो से फॉर एग्जांपल रॉक्स, what ecosystem services do rocks give? So this is a task that you can do. This was by far the most easiest question. This is something we've been learning through the school days. Which of the following is or are part of 3R as per CPH EEO? So your Public Health and Environmental Engineering Organization. And it would be reduce, reuse, and recycle. Right? These are the 3Rs. So I think reuse and recycle were given, and the other two were repair and recover. All these are part of larger 5R, 7R, 9R concepts. Even repair is done in LCA, life cycle assessment studies, right? But for this particular 3R scope of work, the correct answer would be reuse and recycle. The final question from this particular chapter section was matching sunpath diagrams with their location. According to me, this was a very interesting question because it actually you have to apply the logic of sunpath. You must have come across sunpath. Even in gate 22 there was question on what is your altitude angles. Gate 25 there was a question on zenith angle, right? So you have a sun path, you have your reference point, you have four directions, cardinal direction. What are those? North, east, then you have south and west, right? Then you have some concentric circles that are there. These represent something known as altitude angle. What is altitude angle? Altitude angle is your, so for example, if this is your say this is a ground, this is a normal, this is the sun. So the angle that sun makes with the ground is your altitude angle, and with the normal is zenith angle. That was something that was asked last year. ठीक है, altitude angle clear हो गया. Now this is sectional property, but in plan also it is moving, right? So you have something known as your azimuthal angle. Imagine sun moving in these directions in plan as well as vertically also in angles, right? So it is a two angle based thing. So you have azimuthal angles. Some interesting property of sun path diagram is that sun path diagram for every latitude is same. It doesn't matter. Okay, every latitude has the same sun path diagram. One thing. Secondly, हम लोग बोलते हैं right कि sun moves from east to west across south. So that is not a universal thing. It is only true for northern hemisphere, right? In southern hemisphere, it is ulta. Sun moves from east to west through north. Okay. So four locations were given. Sydney. This is Sydney, Singapore, New Delhi, and Helsinki. This is Finland. Okay. Again, they have been generous enough to give you a city that was asked in urban planning as previous questions. So if you have done PYQ, you must be knowing Helsinki is located in Finland. Finland is a what do we say, above temperate zone, so more towards the pole, right? So that is there. The moment you see Sydney, your mind should be that your sun path goes across north. This yellow band is basically movement of sun across the year, right? So अगर वो साउथ में है, तो वो सिडनी हो ही नहीं सकता क्योंकि सिडनी में तो नॉर्थ से जाएगा. So this would be correctly Sydney. New Delhi would be something that would be very easy for us because we have been studying in Indian climatic conditions, right? Something like this where you have one line that goes across, say, your north. This is generally if it is located below Tropic of Cancer. Delhi is located above Tropic of Cancer, so this doesn't happen. But still, I'm just saying. And this particular band, it is majorly through the south. This is New Delhi. Singapore's behavior, if you see, is a two-way side because Singapore is located right bang on near the equator. So it has two curvatures. It has southern side and it has some northern side also, right? So again, you could have identified this is Singapore. And Helsinki has an extreme, again, it is across south. It is a very sharp thing because it is polar region and south like northern hemisphere. Why is this particular variation happening? That means this is the summer months, okay, and see how long the sunshine hours are. This is also one way you can characterize. All these are basically your hours. For example, this is 6 a.m., this is 8 a.m., this is 12 p.m. and on. If you see in Helsinki, your sun may rise at say 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. and set at 9 p.m., 10 p.m. You must have heard of polar summers, polar winters, right? So you must have came across these places in Iceland where you have 6 months of summer, 6 months of winter. Helsinki doesn't have that, but I'm saying it is exhibiting very similar traits. If you see your December ka zone, see how short the sunshine hours are. So obviously Singapore won't have that. Singapore generally has equal day and night conditions. So basic climatology and how the concepts of sun path diagram, you could be able to solve this particular MCQ, which is a match the following MCQ. Okay. So this was it with respect to the part one of the video. We have covered three sections broadly. Hope you liked the video. Hope you got to learn something new and strategies that you can apply in your mock test preparation. For that itself, all these things with detailed notes, classes, tests, subject tests, section tests, mini mock tests, and mock tests, as well as a lot of guidance, personal mentoring will be given in our upcoming course, that is UDAN 2.0. It is for GATE Architecture 2027. It is a full length comprehensive course. We have already successfully completed our two batches. One is UDAN 1.0 and Gati 1.0 last year. So that those batches we have covered a lot of topics. We have covered entire PYQ, so 30 plus year PYQs we have analyzed, and multiple tests have been given, mock tests have been given, full length mock tests and all, right? So if you are interested in taking mentorship from our academy, aekam Academy, and by me, I'll be personally mentoring all of you here. So you can contact us on the number that is given here. You can write us to our email ID and you can just inquire. So we'll provide you the details for UDAN 2.0. Okay. If you, so the Udan 2.0 batch will be starting in mid-March. So if you are watching the video and approaching us through this particular video or early approaches there, you can avail a 10% discount also. So that is one thing. So if you are interested and you want to have a strong grip on your preparation along with us, you can feel free to inquire and feel free to message. Or in general, if you have any doubts regarding what is gate architecture, what how should I start gate architecture, even if you don't wish to take a mentorship program, you can always post your doubts, we'll reply to you. Features of this particular course, as I'd already mentioned, you will have full syllabus coverage. That means general aptitude plus common plus B1, that is architecture, and B2 also. So plus B1 and B2. So we are not going to do a selective thing. Everything will be covered, everything will be taught to you, and the strategies for each section will be given. It will be a weekend class, it will be a live class. Majorly, the reason keeping it on weekends is because I know a lot of students are working professionals or they go to college. They find it extremely difficult to attend weekday classes. So as much as can, you have to attend live classes. That's why weekend classes, you'll be given all recordings, extensive question banks that include 30 plus years of PYQs as well as your practice question bank. Weekly tests will be there, that will be your subject test. So for example, we cover one topic in Saturday, Sunday, we'll be having a test on Wednesday based on that topic. So those are weekly tests. Once we cover say one or two sections, three sections, we'll be having a combined sectional test. Then you have mini mock test that will have say around 5-6 sections, and finally a full length mock test that simulate a real life gate exam. So you have an option between B1, B2, you have to make a choice. You exactly as per gate pattern, you'll be given tests. Also, if you join this particular course, that is Udan 2.0, you will be getting free access to our fast track course, that is Gati 2.0 also. So that is your revision can also be taken care of. And as I said, personalized doubt solving and post gate counseling. Apart from this, if you have any doubts anytime, feel free reach out to us on this particular WhatsApp number as well as your our email ID. And do follow us on Instagram. We post a lot of updates, a lot of interesting facts, and you can always inquire on Instagram also. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment on the video. And if you have any suggestions, like these were the questions that were asked or these were the concepts that were asked, feel free to comment, like, share, and subscribe, and share this with all of your friends. Thank you so much.